Under the influence of the moon, a forest has evolved, its plants and animals subject to the ebb and flow of the tides. The interior of the island of Borneo is mountainous. The humid blanket of vegetation which covers these mountains is the richest rainforest on Earth. Heavy rains sweep these forests, removing the soil and its nutrients. This sediment is carried to the coast by swollen mountain rivers. The river slows as it nears the coast and deposits the sediment, and another forest takes root in it, the tidal forest, mangrove. On the northern coast of Borneo, on the island of Siarau, survives one of the oldest of these mangrove forests. A strange world caught between land and sea. Gnarled and twisted roots support the trees which have colonized this place. It's rich and unique, like the inland rainforest, but its inhabitants are different, each peculiarly adapted to survive here. Unique amongst monkeys for its large nose and huge belly, the proboscis monkey is found only in these tidal forests. At high tide, the many creeks and channels of Siarau are flooded by seawater. It's not easy for plants and animals to live here. They've had to adapt to a life both in and out of water, as each day they're inundated by warm, salty tides. But this difficult and constantly changing environment has stimulated the evolution of some of the most extraordinary life forms on Earth. However, nothing would survive here without vast numbers of microscopic animals which live in the water. These minute organisms, like this flatworm, break down the suspended sediment and transform it into essential food for the mangrove. A female fiddler crab is outside her submerged burrow. It's the highest tide of the month, and it's now she has to release from the massive egg cluster she carries up to 10,000 tiny crabs. These young crabs feed on microscopic animals such as the flatworms, and the crabs in turn form a massive food supply for the fish of the mangrove. Each month, billions of tiny crabs are released with the tide. Those that escape the mangrove fish make their way out to sea to mature. There, they are preyed upon by vast numbers of offshore fish. The few that survive return later to the mangrove as adult crabs. The last of the young crabs are helped to escape from their egg sacs. Below, in the mud, live other animals. In fanning currents of water through their burrows, pistol prawns oxygenate the mud. They and the many other animals like crabs that burrow into the mud and oxygenate it enable bacteria and other organisms to survive. These in turn make available chemicals which are essential to the trees. Without these animals, the forest would be unable to survive in the suffocating mud. Within minutes, the mud is covered with crabs emerging from their burrows. The retreating tide has left a scum of nutrients, and the crabs are quick to harvest it. They may have spent many days in their burrows, so all activity is concentrated around the central need to eat quickly. They sift the mud for edible matter and discard the rest as pellets. These contain nitrogen and carbon, a rich source of food for microorganisms. The huge and varied crab population is critical to the mangrove in recycling minerals and organic matter. Strange fish emerge from burrows. They're mud skippers, and they come onto the mud at low tide to sift through the stranded detritus. Like crabs, they sought out the useful vegetable matter. Mosquitoes are a constant irritation. Periodically, males will indulge in spectacular ritualized battles to defend territories. Mudskippers have overcome the difficulties of life out of water by carrying it with them in their large gill chambers. They've no lungs, so this is the only way they're able to absorb oxygen. But oxygen is not only necessary for the animals. Strange roots, pneumatophores, stick up through the mud, often well away from the parent tree. These absorb oxygen through tiny pores and then transfer it to the main roots which lie beneath the mud. Without the benefit of these air-breathing roots, the mangrove trees would suffocate. Salt is a permanent problem, and some trees actually excrete it from special glands in their leaves. But most unusual of all is their fruiting behavior. Their seedlings actually develop on the tree, ready to drop like spears into the mud at low tide. Successful seedlings rapidly establish themselves. As the seedling develops a complex root structure, more and more sediment is trapped. Slowly but surely, the mangrove advances. In the interior of Siarau, fruit bats roost in the older trees, fanning themselves during the heat of the day. When dusk falls, they will leave in their thousands to feed in the rainforest. Cat snakes are a common predator in the mangrove. They usually hunt bats, but this time it's a different prey. Fortunately, the chicks are old enough to flee the nest. A sharp peck from the adult fends off the snake. Cat snakes frequently raid heron nests for eggs and young chicks. Although they don't hunt on the mudflat, they'll cross it to get to other trees. Strangely, the little green heron is the only heron which nests on Siarau. There are predators which specialize in hunting on the mudflat. The crab-eating frog is the only frog able to tolerate salt water, and it's a major predator of fiddler crabs. The blue fiddler's claw waving signals ownership of a patch of mud. Only males have the giant claw, and each vigorously defends his territory. Having successfully defended his territory, the male is now free to court nearby females. Mating is preceded by ritualized feeding on the female's carapace, or shell. During the courtship, he turns her towards him before mating face to face. Stroking reassures her. This simple act is vital for the mangrove. Each month, the billions of young crabs released by pregnant females on the highest tide will nourish and sustain its marine life. Red fiddler crabs also battle over territory. Huge carnivorous mudskippers are also major predators on the mudflats. They and other animals, like the crab-eating macaques, take advantage of low tide to catch crabs hiding in burrows. Occasionally, fish are stranded by the tide, an easy prey for short-clawed otters. Low tide exposes the extraordinary roots which support this old forest. The trees have overcome the difficulties of mud and salt water, but face another constant problem, that of having their leaves eaten by hungry animals like the proboscis monkey. They and their close relative, the silverleaf monkey, feed almost entirely on leaves. Most mangrove trees defend their leaves against such animals with poisonous or indigestible chemicals. Proboscis monkeys have overcome this problem of leaf poisons by feeding mainly on the leaves of the sonoratia tree, which are not poisonous. They're simply tough and difficult to digest. But nevertheless, the monkey eats large quantities of these leaves and digests them in its huge belly. This contains a double stomach. Inside, bacteria work on the tough leaves, breaking down the cellulose, and this allows the nutritious protein in the leaves to be digested. There may be as many as 80 monkeys in a group. Between them, they can reach most leaves. Large, heavy males feed in the sturdy center of the tree. Lighter monkeys venture onto the smaller branches, and infants stretch to the very tips to reach leaves inaccessible to their elders. Although they readily feed on mature leaves, young, more palatable leaves are still the most desirable, and the branches are picked clean. Young proboscis always stay close to their parents, learning the skills needed to survive amongst the trees. At dusk, the fruit bats leave Siarau in their thousands to feed many miles away in the rainforest. Nightfall brings change to the mangrove. The flowers of Soneratia are opening, preparing for the night's pollinators. It's now that many of the mangrove's leaf eaters become active. A butterfly's egg. Inside, a caterpillar prepares to leave. It will spend its life eating leaves until it's large enough to mature into a butterfly. For leaf-eating insects, like chrysomelid beetles, the mangrove is a mosaic of poisons. Except for Soneratia, most species of tree in the mangrove have their own particular chemical defense. This presents a problem to a tiny animal like a caterpillar, which lacks the huge stomach and mobility of the proboscis monkey. It's usually restricted to one tree. To survive, it's had to overcome the chemical defenses of that particular tree, enabling it to digest the nutritious parts of the leaves. However, being limited to an individual tree makes insects particularly vulnerable to weaver ants, which colonize many of the Soneratia trees. The ants don't feed on the tree itself. Instead, they capture and kill any insects that come within range. Even the beetle's shell is no protection. The ants will force a way under its wing case. The ants are often encouraged to take up residence by the presence of leafhoppers. Leafhoppers feed on the sap of the tree. As they feed, they secrete a sugary solution, which is quickly taken by the ants. Other species of leafhopper are milked and protected, like cattle. The ants are quick to take advantage of this reliable and nutritious source of food, and as a result, the trees are protected. Soneratia has no defensive chemicals, so it benefits especially from the presence of these ants. Leaf-eating insects are not the only enemies of the trees. On the mud, different animals are at work. Seedlings are quickly attacked by sesama crabs. They're the commonest crab in the mangrove and feed on a wide variety of food. They do cause much damage to seedlings, but they're also important because they're quick to devour and break down other plant material, thus making it available as a source of nutrients. Mudskippers are also active at night, and so are their predators. The dog-faced snake is unique among snakes. It hunts almost exclusively on the mudflats, preying on the huge mudskipper and crab population. The ants have killed another beetle, and more worker ants are soon brought to the scene of the kill. They drag the victim back to the nest, which is made of living leaves. Within the nest, a single queen lays all the eggs of the colony. She's constantly fed and tended by the workers, who also feed her growing larvae. But ants are not the only inhabitants of the nest. Incredibly, a lycaenid caterpillar, oblivious to the presence of the ants, is actually feeding on the leaves that form the nest. Instead of killing it, the ants are in constant attendance. The caterpillar has acquired the same chemical odor as the ants. This pacifies them. The damage to the nest is repaired by the worker ants. Their larvae secrete a silken thread, and they use them to stitch the leaves together. The ants also tolerate the caterpillar's presence because of a sugar solution which it secretes, like the leafhopper, from a gland in its abdomen. It supplies sugar and protein for the ants, so they in turn will protect the caterpillar from predators. Sugar and protein are vital, and wherever they're available, especially in the form of the nectar produced by Sonoratia's flowers, animals are attracted. As they lap the nectar, the bats become covered in pollen. During the course of the night, the bats will visit all of the flowering Sonoratia trees in the mangrove, thus pollinating them. Even as a chrysalis, the lycaenid caterpillar is still tended by the weaver ants. The pull of the moon is at its most powerful. It's time for the highest tides. The blue fiddler senses a change. It scrapes mud together to take into its burrow as a source of food. With the coming of this tide, she may be under the mud for several days. The fiddler cuts a perfectly shaped plug of mud to seal the burrow against the incoming tide. In the lower branches of a tree, a moth caterpillar prepares for the incoming tide in a different way. It weaves a silken chamber, which will allow it to survive in a bubble of air when the tide immerses it. As the lycaenid butterfly emerges from its chrysalis, the ants are still in attendance. With nothing to offer the ants, it's now in danger. Although it's at its most vulnerable while drying its wings, incredibly, the ants ignore it. It may still be protected by its chemical odor. The rising tide brings danger to the weaver ants. Archerfish capture insects by persistently firing a powerful jet of water from their mouths. They often hunt insects, but usually feed on the tiny crabs and microorganisms that come with the tide. The moth caterpillar may be underwater for many hours, but it's able to graze safely within its airlock. Others come in with the tide. The mangrove becomes the home of young prawns, which mature here before migrating offshore to breed. They, and the huge population of crabs and fish, are utterly dependent on the mangrove's rich source of nutrients. Swirling amongst the roots of the forest, this organic soup sustains not only the inhabitants of the forest, but also enormous offshore fisheries. But the incoming tide is not the only change. One peculiar animal is helping the mangrove to consolidate. The mud lobster, an incessant mound builder. Older mounds, sometimes 6 feet high, dominate the interior of the forest. It appears to spend its whole life within the chambers of its burrow, feeding on detritus in the mud. How it breeds and whether it ever leaves the mound is not known. Almost nothing is known about this strange animal, but its effect on the mangrove is quite dramatic. Just on dawn, the bats return. Tens of thousands roost on the island of Siarau. During the night, they've eaten fruits in the rainforest. Now their droppings will help to enrich the environment of the mangrove. High tide reveals the extent of the mud lobster's work. Their mounds rise above the water level, creating islands. These are quickly colonized by the wind-blown spores of a fern. They germinate quickly on the fertile mud of the mound. Slowly, a carpet of vegetation covers the islands, and the interior of the mangrove becomes submerged in a sea of ferns. Through the work of the mud lobster, the mangrove is consolidating. As the mangrove develops, plants like this epiphyte move in from the rainforest, along with rainforest animals. The mouse deer is one of the tiniest hoofed animals in the world, less than 12 inches high. With consolidation comes protection from the storms that buffet the coast during the monsoon. There's no fresh water in the mangrove, so monkeys are quick to take advantage of the rain. The storm travels inland towards the rainforest, and tranquility returns to the mangrove. For millions of years, this strange world has been a shelter and a nursery for the many animals and plants here. Enormous numbers of fish have thrived on the nutrients released daily into the tides. But it's not the immediate effects of the storm that threaten the mangrove. In many parts of the tropics, mangrove forests lie devastated, cleared for development. And now there's a new threat. Throughout the tropics, the rainforests, which have given life to and have sustained the mangrove, are also being destroyed. If these forests disappear, the mangrove below will suffocate in the torrent of mud released from unprotected hills. Life in the mangrove will also disappear. In the hills above Siarau, the rainforest still survives. For the moment, the tidal forest is safe.